April 1990. The Lhotse South Face, Nepal. Yugoslavia's greatest alpinist, Tomo Chasin, stands alone at the base of a 3,200-meter wall of ice and rock, a wall that has already killed some of the best climbers in the world. He adjusts his pack and takes his first step up. 19 years later, Kangchenjunga, the third highest mountain on Earth. Oh Yoon-soon, South Korea's most decorated female climber, steps out of her tent into a blizzard. Her sponsors, her country, and her rival are all watching. She begins to climb. 2022, a small office, Germany. Eberhard Jurgalski opens a satellite image on his computer. He has never stood above 8,000 meters in his life. He types a single number into his spreadsheet: 15 feet. All three of them changed Himalayan mountaineering forever. All three had the climbing world at their feet. None of them could prove the truth of what they claimed, from a Yugoslav superstar on the most dangerous unclimbed wall on Earth, to a Korean woman in a race for history, to a German accountant who rewrote 3 decades of records from his desk. These are the Himalayan summit frauds that fooled the entire climbing world for decades. Welcome to Tourist Tragedies. Viewer discretion is advised. Tomo Chasin was not a cautious man. He was not a team player. And he was not the kind of alpinist who waited for ideal conditions before attempting what had never been done. He was born in 1959 in Kranj, in what was then Yugoslavia, a small city nestled in the foothills of the Julian Alps. By his mid-20s, he was already operating in a category entirely his own. Where other elite climbers built their reputations on well-funded team expeditions with professional support, Chasin built his own solo winter ascents in the Alps that the broader mountaineering community considered borderline suicidal. In 1986, he became the first person to solo all 3 of the great north faces of the Alps in a single week: the Eiger, the Grandes Jorasses, and the Matterhorn, in winter, alone, without a single witness. By the late 1980s, he was widely regarded as the finest technical alpine climber alive, a man who could operate at the absolute ceiling of human capability, without supplemental oxygen, without a partner, and without hesitation. Yugoslavia treated him as a national treasure: sponsors, magazine covers, international recognition. He was the answer to Reinhold Messner, and many believed he was better. His life, by every measure, was perfect. And then he found the Lhotse South Face. The Lhotse South Face is not a climb. It is a statement. Rising 3,200 meters from base to summit, it is one of the largest and most technically demanding vertical walls in the entire Himalayan range. By 1990, it had been attempted by some of the finest mountaineers alive. Every one of them had turned back. Several had not come home at all. The Slovenian team that attempted a direct line in 1981 described it as standing inside a vertical desert of ice. Jerzy Kukuczka, one of the greatest climbers in history and the second man ever to summit all 14 8,000ers, died on this very face in October of 1989 when his rope snapped at 8,200 meters. His body was never found. The wall had claimed one of the 5 best climbers who ever lived just 6 months before Chasin claimed to have soloed it alone. To stand at the base and look straight up was to understand that what this mountain was demanding was not merely skill. It was something that had not yet been proven possible. This is the wall Tomo Chasin told the world he had climbed alone. He announced the ascent in April of 1990. He said he had made the first solo ascent of the South Face in a continuous push over parts of 3 days, reaching an elevation of 8,516 meters. If true, it would have been one of the greatest solo achievements in the history of the sport, not just in the Himalayas, anywhere. He had no partner, no support team, no independent witnesses. He had been entirely alone on the most dangerous unclimbed wall on Earth. Initially, the climbing world extended the benefit of the doubt. Chasin had a legitimate track record. His verified alpine ascents were extraordinary. If anyone alive could pull something like this off, it might be him. But the Lhotse South Face was not the Alps. And the more carefully the community examined his account, the more the story began to fall apart. The first problem was the photographs. When the international climbing community demanded documentary evidence, Chazen provided images, and then, one by one, the photographs began to speak against him. French and Russian climbers who had been active in the same region during the same period recognized the terrain immediately. Some of the photographs had been taken by Vicky Groschel, a fellow Slovenian alpinist. Others had been taken by members of a Russian expedition, active on Lhotse at the same time. None of them had been taken by Tomo Chazen. His explanation was that he had been too exhausted near the summit to use his own camera. He said he had borrowed the images from his colleagues simply to give the press a visual sense of what the upper mountain looked like. He was not lying about the climb itself, he insisted. He was merely illustrating it with other people's photographs. The community did not accept this. Independent analysts worked backward through his claimed timeline. The vertical gain per hour that Chazen would have needed to sustain on a technical mixed wall at high altitude, in the conditions he described, was beyond anything ever recorded in the sport. No climber in history had moved at that speed through terrain of that difficult at that elevation. The numbers did not hold. They did not hold by a margin that suggested either a law of physics had been temporarily suspended or a story had been invented. Then came the evidence from the mountain itself. Subsequent expeditions that attempted the Lhotse south face in the years following found nothing to indicate that a solo climber had passed through. No abandoned equipment, no crampon marks that could be attributed to a solo passage, no remnants of any kind. The mountain had no memory of him. The verdict came slowly and then all at once. By the mid-1990s, the majority of the mountaineering establishment had rejected the ascent. The Union Internationale des Associations d'Alpinisme never formally recognized the claim. Reinhold Messner called it questionable. The Slovenian climbing establishment, which had celebrated Chazen as their greatest export, found itself unable to defend him against evidence it could not counter. Tomo Chazen has never retracted. He maintains to this day that he climbed the south face of Lhotse in the spring of 1990. He gave the world photographs that were not his, a timeline that did not hold, and a story that the mountain itself refused to confirm. Here is what I keep returning to when I think about Tomo Chazen. His verified alpine climbs were genuinely extraordinary. His reputation before 1990 was not built on exaggeration. Nobody questions whether Tomo Chazen was a great climber. The question I cannot answer is this: how does a man whose career was already secure, whose legend needed no inflation, risk everything on a photograph he did not take? Was it ambition beyond what any mountain could satisfy? Was it the weight of being Yugoslavia's greatest alpinist and needing to stay that way? Or was there a version of this where he actually started the south face, climbed higher than any person before him, and simply could not bring himself to say the word retreat? I have read every account of this ascent. I have looked at the photographs. I have read every explanation he has offered. What I know is this: a man who submits another climber's photographs as evidence of his own summit, and then explains that he was simply too exhausted to take his own, understands the difference between reaching the top and claiming to have reached the top. I don't know which one Tomo Chazen actually did. But what happens when the fraud is not about a photograph at all? What if the evidence is not an image borrowed from a colleague, but something physically planted on the mountain itself? Something a later climber could reach out and touch. What happened next may offer a completely different theory of how someone standing this close to history chooses to cross a line they cannot uncross. May 2009. Kangchenjunga. Kangchenjunga stands at 8,586 meters. It is the third highest mountain on Earth, and by reputation, one of the most dangerous. Its Nepali name translates to 5 treasures of snow. Climbers who have spent time on its upper ridges call it something less poetic. Oh Yoon-soon knew exactly what Kangchenjunga was. Born in South Korea in 1966, she came to high-altitude mountaineering relatively late, not taking it up seriously until her mid-20s. What she lacked in an early start, she compensated for with a methodical, relentless approach to the 8,000ers that made her one of the most funded and decorated female mountaineers in the world. By 2009, she had already summited 13 of the 14 8,000-meter peaks on Earth. She needed one more, and she was not alone in needing it. Spanish climber Edurne Pasaban was in the same race. Corporate sponsors on both sides were investing heavily in the competition. Media on 2 continents was tracking every move. Whoever finished first would be the first woman in history to summit all 14 8,000ers. The prize was not a medal, it was immortality. Kangchenjunga was the last mountain standing between Oh Yoon-soon and that title. The day Oh Yoon-soon's team attempted the summit of Kangchenjunga in May of 2009, the weather was not cooperating. The upper mountain was locked in a heavy storm. Visibility was poor, the wind was moving fast. Other expeditions operating on Kangchenjunga at the same time made the decision to wait it out or descend. These were experienced professionals reading the same conditions and arriving at the same conclusion. Today was not the day. Oh Yoon-soon's team kept moving. She later claimed to have reached the summit. She provided a photograph. Oh Yoon-soon, standing at what she said was the top of Kangchenjunga, bare rock visible beneath her feet. This was the first problem. Rival teams who had been on the mountain during the same weather window confirmed what conditions actually looked like near the true summit that day. The top of Kangchenjunga was buried under deep snow. Every climber who had been operating in the upper mountain during that storm described the same thing. Bare rock at the summit of Kangchenjunga on that particular day was not possible. The photograph was not taken at the summit. The second problem was the flag. Oh Yoon-soon claimed to have planted a South Korean flag at the top, securing it with rocks against the wind. Subsequent climbers who reached the actual summit found exactly that. A South Korean flag, weighed down with rocks, positioned exactly as described, not at the summit, significantly below it. Then came the third problem, and it was the one that could not be explained away. One of Oh Yoon-soon's own Sherpas told investigators that the team had stopped well short of the true summit. The conditions had become too dangerous to continue, but the sponsors were waiting. The race was live, and the decision was made to claim the top regardless. The Korean Alpine Federation launched an official investigation into their own national hero. The result was unambiguous. Oh Yoon-soon had not reached the summit of Kangchenjunga. The conclusion was confirmed by the physical evidence on the mountain, by the testimony of rival expedition members, and by one of the people who had been on the climb with her. The title of first woman to summit all 14 8,000ers was officially awarded to Edurne Pasaban. Oh Yoon-soon's legacy in the country that had celebrated her as a pioneer was permanently and irrevocably changed. She has never fully acknowledged the finding. 2 stories, 2 summit claims, both impossible to defend against the evidence the mountain left behind. But what if the problem was never about a climber lying? What if the real question was whether anyone could agree on where the summit actually was to begin with? What comes next did not involve a single dishonest climber. It involved a German statistician with a spreadsheet, and it made the mountaineering world angrier than any fraud ever had. 2022, Germany. Picture the summit of Annapurna, 8,091 meters above sea level. The wind at the top is strong enough to rip a tent from its anchors. The temperature at the ridge can fall to minus 40 degrees Celsius. The air holds roughly a third of the oxygen available at sea level. Now, picture the man who decided he knew exactly where that summit was. Eberhard Jurgalski is not a mountaineer. He has never worn crampons on a Himalayan face. He has never spent a night in the death zone. He is a German statistician who runs a database called 8000ers.com, widely considered the most authoritative record of Himalayan climbing achievements in the world. His life's work is a spreadsheet, a decade of forensic cross-referencing, historical summit photographs matched against modern high-resolution satellite topography. The one thing you need to know about Eberhard Jurgalski: he believes a fact is a fact, regardless of who it inconveniences. In 2022, he was about to inconvenience everyone. After a decade of quietly cross-referencing historical summit photographs against satellite topography, Dragowski published his findings in 2022. His conclusion was this: on several of the 14 8,000ers, including Manaslu, Dhaulagiri, and Annapurna, the summit ridges are so wide, so undulating, and so visually ambiguous that most climbers from the golden age of Himalayan mountaineering had never actually stood on the precise highest geographic point. They had stood on a false summit, a high point that looked like the top from where they were standing, but was not, by a matter of feet, the actual peak. The entire golden age of Himalayan climbing had been built, in part, on a collective measurement error, not a deliberate lie, not a fraud. A geometric misunderstanding between a generation of climbers navigating by sight at extreme altitude in the 1970s and 80s, and a satellite launched decades later with the resolution to identify individual boulders from space. On Annapurna, the gap was approximately 15 feet. That 15-foot gap destroyed a legacy. In 2023, Dragowski took his data to the Guinness Book of World Records. Guinness acted. They officially stripped Reinhold Messner of his recognition as the first person to summit all 14 8,000-meter peaks. The basis: during his 1985 ascent of Annapurna, Messner had stopped roughly 15 feet short of the true summit on a long connecting ridge. The new record holder, Guinness announced, was American climbing legend Ed Viesturs. Ed Viesturs refused the record, publicly and without hesitation. He said that applying 2020 satellite coordinates to a 1985 mountain ascent was ridiculous. Messner was the pioneer. The record was not his to accept. Messner called alpinism an art form, not a mathematical equation to be administered by people who had never left their desks. Today, commercial expeditions on Manaslu require clients to push past the traditional summit to a narrow, unstable snow formation, meters higher, entirely to satisfy Dragowski's coordinates. A man at a desk in Germany is now dictating where climbers must stand on top of the world. The climbing world has a phrase for what makes high-altitude record-keeping fundamentally different from every other elite sport. They call it the honor system. Journalist and climber John Krakauer, writing about the 1996 Everest disaster, observed that at extreme altitude, with no cameras and no referees, the only witness to any achievement is the climber who was there. Everyone else is operating on trust. The entire history of high-altitude mountaineering runs, at its core, on the personal testimony of the people who made the climbs. Tomo Chasen understood the honor system completely. He knew that the Lhasa South face was too remote, too dangerous, and too vast for any subsequent expedition to say with certainty that his boots had not touched its ice. He borrowed photographs, he offered a timeline that did not hold, and he retained a sliver of deniability for decades because the mountain itself could not stand up and contradict him. The honor system protected him and failed the sport simultaneously. Oh Yoon-soon's team leaned on the same assumption. They believed that corporate momentum and national pride would carry the claim past the threshold of scrutiny. What they did not anticipate was that the mountain would speak anyway. A flag in the wrong place, a summit photograph taken in the wrong conditions, a Sherpa who chose to tell the truth. The honor system only holds when there is no contradicting evidence. They left contradicting evidence everywhere. Dragowski was the honor system's executioner. He was not interested in personal testimony. He had satellite data. When he applied that data to 30 years of Himalayan history, he found that the honor system had been generating quiet, unintentional inaccuracies for decades. The fury that followed was not really about Messner. It was about the discovery that a sport built on personal testimony could not survive contact with a ruler. These three cases cover the full failure range of a system that was never designed to be tested this way. A man who weaponized its absence of verification, a woman whose evidence contradicted her own claim, and a statistician who replaced it with coordinates. The sport is still asking the question none of them could settle. At the very top of the world, with no witnesses, where exactly does the summit end and the story begin?